So, welcome back. Um, Today, we're going to address some of the illusions in life. I've mentioned three previously. So, we'll probably deal with about 8 illusions in life. And remember, illusions are false, they're not true. And these illusions are inside of our belief systems for most of us, at least in part. So it's a necessary part of doing what I call the archaeology of the mind or the psyche. The first illusion I want to look at is the illusion of failure. I have dealt with a number of people, and interestingly enough, usually men, that carry around the primary declaration, I am a failure. That is not true. It's a part of a script that was handed to individual people. There's no such thing as failure, it's an illusion. And I used to tell the kids in psych class in high school, F stands for feedback and not failure. So it's important for us to pay attention to feedback from the world, but never interpret that feedback as failure. Uh, I think Lincoln ran for political office about 10 times, and 9 of the 10 times he failed. Quote, failed. And, the rest of the story is history. The next illusion we need to look at, and this is particularly important, not only individually but globally, is the illusion of disunity, which basically says we are separate and apart. Now, when you look at that on a deep level, and this comes out of A Course in Miracles, this is identification with the body. So one of the things you might want to consider is we are not our bodies. Our bodies are a vehicle. For example, they're a means of communication. So we are much more than our bodies. We are spirit. And I would say or suggest that is the truth about us. Another illusion is the illusion of insufficiency. So there is not enough. Now, one of the interesting parts about that is that I read recently that in the United States, we waste 40% of our food production, including things like if vegetables or fruits don't look perfect in terms of distribution, they're actually disposed of. That 40% could feed millions of people. So, another important thing about the illusion of disunity is that it gives rise to criticism. So, as I suggested in an earlier video, when I'm criticizing another, it's really about a lack of self acceptance, and it's a projection. Another illusion is the illusion of requirement. Now, this could be a particularly devastating illusion to live out of because if we think there's a requirement, then we're obliged. And what happens often is when we work out of requirement, what we do is build resentment. So I would suggest to you that there are no obligations in life. What we are responsible or responsible. So we're able to respond and create in the moment. Another illusion is the illusion of conditionality. So we would look at a thing like love and say that love is conditional. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that there are no conditions in love. I asked a friend of mine, an artist that lived in Taos, New Mexico, I said, is it true it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all? And he said, there is no loss in love. So therefore, love is not conditional, it's unconditional. And it's also universal. There are more immature forms of love that give rise to the idea that love is conditional. And here is another devastating illusion. And remember, illusions are false. The illusion of superiority, that there are better and worse people, that there are special people, and I would suggest that that's not true. And the illusion of superiority, if you find yourself comparing yourself to others, and at times saying that that person is superior to me, you're in the illusion of superiority. And probably the most insidious illusion is the illusion of ignorance. And this is what it says: you do not know that these are illusions. So if we look at two of the illusions, the illusion of separation or disunity and the illusion of superiority, it's no surprise that we perpetuate violence toward each other. Because I am a superior to you and I'm separate from you, so I can be violent toward you. Now, what makes it particularly important is that these illusions generate a cultural story. So you may have noticed this story going on in our society. Survival of the fittest. So if we look across our structures in the United States, many of these structures, institutions, are based on this story, that only the fittest survive, only the strong survive. So what we do with that is set up a lot of competition. And of course, we know what happens with competition versus cooperation. To the victor goes the spoils. So look at the history of humanity and we can see that playing out through war. So we're going to go in and gather up all the spoils if we are the victor. What you don't know won't hurt you. Well, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance hurts. So if we look at things like prejudice, that's based in ignorance, it's destructive. So all of these illusions are excerpts from Conversations with God, and I believe book 3. So the importance of this is that we look at our social structures, our institutional arrangements, and see it through the eyes of these are illusions. For example, schooling, and I spent 20 years in schooling in various positions, is based on competition. Only the strong survive. That we stratify students based on grades and not on progress. And interestingly enough, I looked up the etymology of the word competition from the Greek, and one of the meanings I found was to bring out the best in the other. And that's not how we go about our business in the US. So in the extreme form, if you look at these illusions, we're talking about justifying war. That we're separate from the other, and we're separate from the other nation, and we're superior, so we're going to justify war. And I'm not challenging war based on self-defense. But there have been many wars that we've engaged in that are not about self-defense. They're based in illusions. So I would urge you to start taking a look with that lens on and looking at these illusions and how they're playing out in our world and how they're not beneficial. They're, in fact, often destructive. So, once again, look at our business world. We're talking about cutthroat. So I have competitors that are the enemy. And it's kind of interesting because when I think about the word enemy, I think about the teachings of Jesus, and he said, love your enemies. And I also believe, I'm not a biblical scholar, but I also think that Jesus said, of these, love is the greatest commandment. So if we look at that illusion of conditionality, I don't think Jesus was talking about conditional love. So something to mull over, something to notice, not judge, but just notice, and ask yourself, based on my own belief system, am I holding these beliefs based on illusions, like we talked about previously? So thanks for your time.